Brian Mudd Show is on News Radio 610 WIOD.
The latest surge of COVID-19 across the country due to the Delta variant has companies reassessing how their workplace operates. And for more on those kinds of challenges, I'm joined now by Joel Patterson, workplace expert and founder of the Vested Group. Joel, thanks so much for coming on. So last year, companies had to make some major adjustments on the fly. And at this point this year, many thought they'd be back to normal, but that's just not the case. How are companies addressing this latest phase of the pandemic?
Well, now is different depending on the day that you ask it, because everyone's got a little bit of a different take on it. Like you said, a lot of companies have changed their plans. A lot of major companies, Apple, Google, were planning on coming back in October. Before that, they were coming back in September. And before that, they were coming back in July. And so now they've pushed it to next year. And I think what most companies are looking at this point is they're hesitant to even come up with a date. Just let it ride at this point, because no matter what you come up with, it's probably going to change. And I think that's the best policy for business leaders to really consider, is say, when you're talking to your employees, be open and transparent with them about what's going on. And they recognize that everything is changing by the day, and no one really expects you to hold tight to the date with these things that are outside of your control. But the problem is that creates so much stress and anxiety in a lot of people when they don't know what's going to happen next. They want to do good things for their business, but it's really challenging on people to continue to face this kind of back and forth and never knowing if they're going to the office or staying home.
How important has really good communication from top to bottom in each company been throughout the course of this pandemic?
And I think it's more important than ever. Everybody knows that communication is important, but in a time like the last 18 months where you don't know what's going to happen, and people are making decisions for the first time ever in a business world. They don't, nobody's had to kind of navigate these waters before. And so it's just been really important to make sure that when you face a situation where you've got to communicate with your employees, you tell them, all right, look, this is what I believe we're going to do next. This is why I believe that, and I need your support in that. And they're okay with that, as long as you are just being honest about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Now, communication is always, speaking, but even more so these days, it's listening and making sure that you're touching base with your people. You know how they're holding up. Again, all this back and forth is going to create a lot of stress for people, and you've got to be able to sit down, take 5 minutes, and be intentional about the time that you spend with your people, so that they know that you are there for them and that you're going to do everything that you possibly can to keep them safe and healthy and employed.
I'm joined right now by Joel Patterson, workplace expert and founder of the Vested Group. We're talking about how companies are adjusting to this latest COVID-19 surge. For companies that are able to offer employees some kind of a work from home option, even if it's more of a hybrid one, the longer this pandemic continues, and that is part of how businesses continue to operate, how much does that solidify itself as an option beyond this pandemic?
I really believe it already has. It's not shifting to just an all work remotely kind of perspective, but it is hybrid. And I think that most companies are going to just stick with that. A lot of people do appreciate the flexibility around having a couple of days to work from home for all the reasons that we've talked about a million times. But you've got to get people back in the office in most situations. You're going to have industries where it won't be an issue, but I think that most people, most organizations at this time, they're starting to see that short-term kind of honeymoon period working from home and the productivity. And now we're seeing that the productivity is slipping a little bit while stress is increasing and burnout. I think people just need the camaraderie and the ability to develop relationships with people. And really, that's how business grows, right? You can't, if you're not challenging each other, if you're not finding ways to do new things in your organization, then there's no way to really to find a new way to do great things, which is what all businesses are trying to do. And it really, it does make, it is important for that group of people to be able to just get together and rekindle some of the relationships they had a couple of years ago. And I see people do it all the time when they come into the office for the first time and the light bulb goes off. They realize how nice that relationship was, and they catch up with their colleagues, and it does change the game.
It certainly appears like when it comes to the workforce right now, there's just a massive disruption going on, and it looks like a lot of people are on the lookout for potentially a better setup than what they had before because of how some companies are adjusting to this new workplace environment. The disruption that we're seeing, how extensive do you think it is, and how long do you think it's likely to continue?
Well, it is real. It is extensive, and I think it's going to last for at least the next 6 months or so. What we're seeing is just a ton more chaos thrown into the market for reasons that you would never predict, but also I wouldn't have expected this to be where we are coming out of the pandemic, and the labor market is tight. You would think that people would be worried about their jobs, but a lot of people, either they were thinking about this before the pandemic or during the pandemic, they just had time to think and reevaluate where they are, what they want to do. And there's a lot of people that are looking around and finding real opportunities, a lot of times for more salary. They can negotiate things like work from home calendars, things around vaccinations and mask mandates clearly play into how people are making these decisions. So there's a ton of these things happening right now that make finding, retaining, recruiting, all of those things from an employee perspective really challenging. And that is not, it doesn't appear to be slowing down at all. And I would, like I said, expect to see that for at least the next 6 months.
I'm joined by Joel Patterson, workplace expert and the founder of the Vested Group. Do you see certain sectors where they potentially have a leg up in all of this because they're able to offer different perks that match what a lot of workers are looking for these days that maybe some other sectors just can't match?
Yeah, I mean, manufacturing and things like where you've got to be there physically, they're never going to be able to keep up with this kind of thing. But any industry that has a technology focus, so anybody in IT, healthcare, most of those companies have already been doing remote work to some extent. Now, it pushed it much more in the face of everyone, clearly, over the last 18 months, but the technology held up, the people have held up, and it's really just expanding on what we'd already put in place. Now, having the option of being able to go back and forth was the nice thing before. Being forced into being one way or another right now, I think, is challenging for people. But, it really hasn't impacted a lot of those industries all that significantly, other than figuring out how we're going to, replace some of the camaraderie that we have around our culture and our internal teams. That stuff is still yet to be figured out.
Even before the pandemic, there's always been an issue matching up those who are looking for work with the skills needed to fill the jobs that are open. Do you see employers getting a little bit more creative with how they go about doing that because they're so desperate for employees right now?
Yeah, and some of it's not good for whatever industry they're in. I can tell you I'm in technology services industry myself, and I've seen and experienced other competitors in going basically down your list of employees on LinkedIn and just calling it's dialing for dollars these days. I mean, they get regardless of the skill set. If they've got a certain word on a resume, they think that they can hire that person and turn them into gold, apparently. And they're doing things that are not natural, right? They're trying to whether they're throwing money around or offering different perks. It's not going to pay off in the long run. They're trying to buy market share in the early, at least in the next few months, and it's not going to play out, and that can cause a lot of long-term damage because you've got to recover from kind of the bubble that you've created in the salary market.
Joel Patterson, workplace expert and founder of the Vested Group, with some insight into how companies are adjusting to the latest COVID-19 surge and this new disrupted workplace environment. Joel, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes to join us.
Thank you, Ryan. Have a great day.